Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session. It's called the Mental Boardroom, the key to keeping your shit together in these crazy days. So I hope that everyone can hear me, can see me. I am going to keep my eye on the chat with Katrine to make sure there's no technical issues because I am in Vegas. It is 5:30 in the morning. I'm teaching at a conference here, and when I found out that Unicorns in Tech was happening at the same time, I couldn't say no because you are my family, my European family, and I don't get many opportunities to be able to interact with you and work with you and teach with you. So excited to be here and to work with you. We have a very limited time, so buckle up. I know you have been sitting here all day listening to amazing talks, being inspired, learning great tips and tricks, hopefully networking, hopefully building really beautiful connections. And now I'm here. I think I might be one of your last speakers of the day. So I hope you get a ton of value out of our short time together. I'm also very excited for our Q&A. I can't wait to get to know some of you. And I'm going to kind of blow through this. So this is going to be a little bit like a fire hose, like the water is just right at you, right? And I'm hoping to give you a ton of value. But if you do have any questions about this process, how you can apply it in your life, how you can teach it to others, please come into the Q&A afterwards because I would love to flesh that out with you. All right, I'm going to attempt to share my screen, but my slides are really just like frosting on the cake. We don't have to have them. They're just pretty to look at. So I am probably going to be going back and forth. All right. And tab and the presentation. Let's do this. Okay. What do we have? The Mental Boardroom. This is a way to utilize your emotional intelligence. Now, I actually don't know, is this the buzzword in Europe that it is in the States, emotional intelligence? It's all over the place. Typically in business, emotional intelligence, the definition is coming from this guy, I think his name is John Gottman, and he has like a whole framework, many, many books on emotional intelligence and what they are. That's too complicated for me. So I take emotional intelligence down to like the nitty gritty, right? The real foundation of it, which to me is self-awareness. So I define self-awareness as the intentional observation of our thoughts and actions without judgment. And that's the key, isn't it? That's like right there, the difference is we are observing our thoughts, our actions around anything at all, but we're not following it up with that instant judgment. So many of us find that the critical inner voice is always there, is constantly there, right? It's talking to us when we decide what we wear, what we don't wear, what we eat, what we don't eat, how much sleep we're getting, if we're exercising or not. That critical inner voice is just can be constant. And so self-awareness is when we slow down and take the time to observe that voice or observe our thoughts or observe our actions or emotions without following it up with that instant judgment. I know we could do a whole talk just on that, right? But we are just using this as a tool into a broader framework. So self-awareness, the intentional observation of our thoughts and actions without judgment. So the 4 pillars, like going back to that guy in his book, he had 4 pillars of emotional intelligence, or EQ. Self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. We're pretty much sticking for this presentation in the self-awareness realm because I really feel like without the self-awareness, the rest of it isn't very effective. So how did I get into this? Who am I? And why am I on your computer screen talking to you? Let me give you the briefest of summaries. I was 37 when I came out. I got married at 20 to my husband, and then I had 4 kids. And to put it on top of that, I was in one of the really high demand, really conservative religions here in the United States. I not only believed that homosexuality was a sin, but I taught that to my children. And then at 37, I realized why I hated my life. And I came into this awareness, self-awareness of who I am and what I was really supposed to be doing with my life. And that caused a little bit of disruption. But the biggest part of it was that I wondered, how in the world did I end up here? It is a little bit shameful, and I know you can all relate to this, to realize that there's a massive part of you that you were never even aware of. I mean, I know not everyone can relate to that. I feel like there are really beautiful people that are really embodied and in touch with their body from a very early age, and they haven't disconnected. And so, I feel like that's where my friends who are like, I knew since I was 4, like, I kind of feel like that is just a blessed experience and not what my experience was. I was ashamed that I didn't recognize this really vital and joyous part of myself for so long, and all the ramifications that that had on the people around me, my ex-husband, my children, etc. So I really started to focus on self-awareness because I never wanted this to happen again, to get to a crossroads in my life and wonder, how did I end up here? Because we know as adults, it's all choices. It's all daily choices, right? So somehow I made all the choices to end up here, but I don't remember it. I was never going to be put in that situation again. So I started a very in-depth study of self-awareness and figuring out how to integrate it into my life at all different levels. But what I did find was as I became aware of myself, my feelings, my emotions, my actions, my thoughts, I followed it up with that really critical inner voice, right? So my antidote for that has been, I don't know if y'all watch, it's an American show, but y'all are in tech, so I think it's quite possible. There's a TV show called The Big Bang Theory. And Leonard's mom is played by this amazing actress, Christine Baranski, and she's like a psychoanalyst doctor. And she observes what's happening, and then she says the word, fascinating. And that is my trigger word to realize to engage the critical thinking part of myself and to realize this is not anything other than data. What I eat, what I don't eat, how much I sleep, what I don't sleep, if I exercise, if I didn't exercise, none of those are indicators of if I'm a good person or a bad person. The judgment doesn't have to be there. It's just data. It's fascinating. So that is the basis for this entire talk, is the self-awareness, observing our thoughts, actions, emotions without judgment, because it's just data. It's fascinating. So I often suggest, and when I have more time, I go into this in depth, but whenever I have people that are like, okay, I really want to practice this self-awareness thing, I strongly suggest that you give yourself challenges and you start off really easy and you get to where it's harder. If you start with the harder topics, you're not going to feel good about it. So I suggest either like a Monday through Friday challenge or like 1 week out of the month or however you want to do it. But you stick with specific topics. You can't become self-aware in all areas of your life all at once just because you decide to. It is a muscle and we have to work it. And so you start with a pretty easy topic like nature. There's not a lot of judgment around nature. So you're going to be able to flex that self-awareness muscle without having to tamp down that judgy voice, right? So you start with things like nature. You might want to do things, finances, relationships, body identity. Those things for me personally, those get harder and harder to sort through the judgment as I work that self-awareness model. So I would suggest you just write out a few topics and then you order them from easiest or the least judgmental to harder, the more judgmental. And then you just practice flexing that self-awareness muscle just on those specific topics. I gave a TED Talk. You can find it by Googling my name. And it was all about, well, it was a lot about self-awareness and the different ways that I integrated these topics into my life, especially my life as a new baby gay in my late 30s. Experiencing for the first time things like queer relationships and trying to use self-awareness at the same time. It's okay. You can laugh at those parts, but the talk, it'll also make you cry, just so you know. Grab some tissues. So how did the mental boardroom come to be? The mental boardroom is a way of making decisions, especially when your life is in transition. And let's be honest, the entire world is in transition right now, right? So when your life is in transition, sometimes you have to make big decisions. And you think, I don't know how to do this. I don't even know who I am. How do I know where I'm going to want to live, or what I'm going to want my job to be, or what relationship I want to be in, or if I want kids or not, when who I am at my core seems to shift pretty constantly? It feels scary. It feels like I'm going to make a decision, a choice I'm going to regret. And so the mental boardroom was developed as a way to navigate through that. And it was because after I came into this realization about myself and who I am, some big decisions had to be made. And for me, that included filing for divorce, leaving my religion, which also meant leaving my community. It meant finding a place to live on my own for the first time since I was 20. It meant figuring out what my career path was going to be, because I had been a stay-at-home mom for almost 2 decades. There were a lot of decisions that needed to be made. And here I was, not even knowing, who am I? I thought I was all these things. I thought I was this conservative, demanding, judgmental, anxiety-ridden mom of 4 kids. And I'm not that anymore. I get to keep the title of mom of 4 kids, but it's in such a different way that I wouldn't even be able to recognize myself if I didn't think about who I am and what I'm feeling right now. So I developed the mental boardroom as a way that literally, as I was going through my divorce and I had to make decisions about where I was going to live, what I was going to do, who my network was going to be, I used the mental boardroom. And then as I started teaching that to other people, I realized what a value it could be. So moving on. By practicing emotional intelligence and developing our own mental board, we have a framework. We're able to make life decisions. We're able to really stay rooted and grounded in our core identity. And we're able to create lasting transformation. And those are the 3 things that I'm hoping you'll be able to see how you'll be able to do that by the end of this presentation, if I can knock it out of the park. Let's move on to different ways that you can form your board. And when I have more time, I go through lots of examples. And here I'm just going to summarize it for you. For today, I'm not saying you're going to stick with this framework forever, but just for today, we're going to pick one of these 4 frameworks. So when you're thinking about a board of advisors, a group of people, personalities that are going to advise you through these decision-making processes. So one example is like the animated movie Inside Out. And that's very emotion-based, right? You have like her anxiety and her anger and her joy, right? So different emotions, all part of her, but all with a very unique perspective, unique motivators, right? For some people, what really grabs them and works well for them is a sports team. So that could be you are the coach, right? You're the head coach, the person in charge. And you might have a defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, an equipment manager, right? So these are all people that are going to be on your board, people, characters, identities that are all a part of you, but all with their unique perspective, so that you can bring your board a question that you need to solve in your life, a decision you need to make. And everyone's going to weigh in. This is going to become a lot more clear as we go through it, I promise. Another way to set up your board is through mentors. For some people, they have voices in their life that come through really clear. Maybe it was an elementary school teacher, or maybe it's a thought leader that you really jive with, like Gandhi or Tony Robbins. Who are those voices in your life that you kind of look to for direction, to remind you of who you really are? They're voices that have really resonated with you. So that's how some people really like to set up their board. But my personal favorite is the executive board. I think it's because I work with a lot of corporations that it helps my brain to be in that atmosphere. So for me, I have, this is a really great YouTube video, and I'm sure a lot of you are aware. Sanders Sides is this incredible series where this one person has all these different parts of him, and they're all separate characters with their own names and their own costumes, and he puts together these incredible videos about it. So oftentimes when I'm speaking to not so tech savvy audience, I show them this video because they've never heard of it before, and it helps solidify what we're talking about here. So if you haven't heard of him, go back after this presentation, go find Sanders Sides. It's hysterical. Okay, so we're going to take a piece of paper, and I want you to create 3 columns. Now, you're not going to get it fully fleshed out in our time together, but it's going to create a great foundation for if you'd like to come back and complete this. So a piece of paper, 3 columns. You've got the title, their perspective, and their opinion about a specific issue. So title of the person on your board, the identity of the person on your board, the perspective, and the opinion. So to form your own board, when I was doing it, and I do it regularly, probably every 6 months, I change up my board a little bit to make sure it's really relevant to what I'm going through now, because the world is weird. So I pick out 3 to 6 roles to have on my board at any certain time. It might be treasurer for my executive board, right? But for you, that might be the director of finance on your sports team. Whatever it is. So I have VP of Offspring, or mom. And then we have research and development. I have this nerdy scientific side that is really into logic and evidence-based results and peer review, maybe because I came from a religion that used none of that. So I really like having that on my board and as a guiding voice in my life right now. You might have public relations. If you have a brand, if you are a brand, if you are an entrepreneur, public relations, you need that on your board, right? I also have a Zen master on my board. I have someone who stays very centered, very grounded, very detached from the emotion and the drama. I need that voice on my board as well. So you're going to pick 3 to 6 roles. So on your paper, I'd like you to have 3 to 6 roles, at least 3. And so their title, that's what's listed here. That's what's going under title. So you need about 3 to 6 of them. Again, I apologize for the speed, but I also don't want to take extra time. So now on your perspective, in your perspective column next to their title, in the perspective column, you're going to write 3 to 5 sentences for each of your board members to really solidify their perspective. Let me give you an example. A VP of Offspring, which is mom. That person is only hyper-focused on the health of my children. Nothing else matters. The health and safety of my children, that is the perspective and the priority of my VP of Offspring. I can't stay hyper-focused like that as a person, as the CEO. I can't stay hyper-focused on just one issue. But that mama bear, that VP of Offspring, that person can do it, right? And I want to give them a voice in every life decision I make, because being the mom is really important to me, and being a successful mom is really important to me. So my VP of Offspring, I know their perspective, the health and safety of the children, period, above all, done, right? So you're going to go through your 3 to 6 board members. They have their title, and now you're going to give them their perspective. Do you have to write a full sentence? No, I don't care. But flesh out their perspective, what their priority is. And now let's put it into practice. Let's really do this. I've given you a very easy scenario to work through with your 3 to 6 board members right there on your paper. You own an automobile that needs a repair. And so the question to your board is, do you pay for the repair or do you buy a new car? This is a high but low stakes situation, right? When we are in that situation, especially when we are not financially independent, this is a big deal. This is a very big deal. And for some of us who aren't real confident in auto repair, This feels like choking. Like this feels like a really intense decision that I have to make. And especially if I'm in a point of transition with my identity and figuring out who I am and where I want to go in my life, this question could feel like it would freeze me. But in this situation, we're able to take it to the board. So I'm going to give you my example of how I would work through this with my board. I would go to my VP of Offspring, my mama bear, and that person would say, you need to have the safest car possible for these children. You are a single mom. You cannot be out there driving by yourself and be broken down on the side of the freeway. That's not an option. So to the mama bear, okay, mama bear wants to buy a new car. That's what mama bear is deciding. But then I go to my research and development person on my board, and they might say, you invested in an incredibly high quality car 7 years ago. And by average, it's still 100,000 miles away from being done. And if you make the investment in the repair, it's probably, you can be confident that this is a high quality car and it's going to last a long time. Right. And then I might go to my treasurer who might say, you don't have the money to buy a new car right now. Are you kidding? No. You're going to pay for the repair, and then we're going to start budgeting in the down payment for a new car, right? So that's probably where my treasurer is going to be. Now, I, as the CEO, I can listen to everyone's perspective. I can take it in once everyone has been heard. And then I can make the decision that feels the most right to me. Now, intuition, trusting your gut, getting really in touch with your emotions and your feelings, that's a discussion for a whole nother time. But to be able to go through all of those different perspectives of the most important values in your life, it lets everyone have a voice. So therefore, if I decide to make the repair and a month later the car breaks down again, or I'm stranded on the freeway, the VP of Offspring can say, I told you so. But it hasn't happened yet. I have learned that when I slow down and I take the time to work through the process and hear from everyone, my gut becomes very clear. My intuition becomes very clear, and I'm able to see the answer that I need to pursue. So let's put it into practice again. And this is where it can get a little deeper. So here's our practice scenario. Your boss at your job continues to misgender you. At first, it was clear they were trying really hard. They kept correcting themselves, and you thought that this was really going to work. But it's been 6 months now, and the trying to gender you correctly, that's gone away. And now it's just starting to feel really uncomfortable, because are you going to deny who you are and not say anything? Or are you going to keep saying something 20 times a day and hope that they finally listen and not damage your relationship with them? I don't know how that's going to work either. So this morning, a friend called you with a job offer, because there's a lot of jobs out there right now, isn't there? And you've heard about how great their culture is. The work looks fun. The culture sounds great, but you'd have to take a pay cut. What are you going to do? Well, in this scenario, it's time to ask all of your board members, those 3 to 6 people that you wrote, their titles and their perspectives. You're going to ask them, what's your perspective? What should I do here? And you get their opinion. Maybe you have the time right now that you could write that out, or just kind of consider going through all of them. And then you get to make your CEO decision. Would the outcome surprise you? Would there be someone screaming? Maybe it's your career development person. Maybe you put that person on your board not even knowing that this situation was going to come up, but knowing that there was something not great about your current employment situation. And so you put that HR director on your board. And now if you go to them, what is their opinion going to be? Are you going to stay with that company? Or are you going to move on? Now your treasurer might be like, no, we cannot make a pay cut. Or your treasurer might be like, you know what? This is worth it. or we can take in a roommate to make this worth it. When the treasurer says a pay cut is okay in this scenario, then you know that's a good way to go. And lastly, I want you to look for the quiet member of your board, the one who's standing in the corner and not saying much. Let me give you an example. I taught this right before the pandemic hit in February of 2020. And then I heard from one of the audience members later, and we were able to really go through his experience, and I learned so much. So the audience member was named Jake, and he was in a similar situation as myself. He was in his late 30s, had been married since his early 20s, in the same religion, many kids, and knew he was gay and knew it was time to embrace that part of himself. And so he had a board made up more about emotions. He had funny Jake, he had tech Jake because he worked in the tech field, and he had ADHD Jake, he had sarcastic Jake, he had all these different parts of himself around his board. And as he started working this framework, as he went through filing for divorce, getting a lawyer, deciding where he was going to live, where his ex-wife was going to live, how they were going to do custody with the kids, the whole thing, right? Many, many decisions. And he would work with his board, his mental boardroom, on all of those decisions. And then there was one weekend, probably 6 months later, that he knew something still wasn't working. He had been able to get through these big life choices, but he didn't really feel fulfilled. He didn't really feel satisfied. And so he decided to take his board on a retreat. And he went away for a weekend to a quiet hotel and spent time with his board to see if he could figure out what was going on. What was his next step? What did he need to move toward? And as he was on his weekend retreat, he remembered hearing me say, "Find the quiet one in the corner who's not speaking up." And he searched his mind for that quiet member. And he found him in the corner of the boardroom. Was homophobic Jake, the one who cringed every time he tried to hold another man's hand, the one who shrunk inside when he thought about kissing another man, the one who prevented him still from coming out to his kids. Once Jake the CEO, was able to recognize that homophobic Jake was sitting on his board. He had just been quiet. But now Jake, the CEO, saw him, and he was able to say, "Thank you. I understand you're here to protect me. I understand that you want me to be safe, and you're scared. But you're not welcome on my board anymore. I'm going to show you the door. Homophobic Jake doesn't get a say in my life anymore." And it was after that weekend that Jake was able to realize that a huge thing that he had been struggling with for decades was that internalized homophobia. And the only way he was able to really move past it was by naming it, seeing it, thanking it, and releasing it. So those are some of the transformations that can happen through the mental boardroom. So I can't see your chat, but I am excited to hear from you in the Q&A. Is there a time in your life that you wish you had a decision-making strategy like this? Can you see how this would integrate into your life specifically? How it might help you? Or does it just feel heavy and maybe a little too much? And that's perfectly fine as well. But I'd love to hear, was there a time, or do you foresee a time where having a framework like this could be really useful and impactful in your life? I would also love to hear, and I'll be asking in the Q&A, what was your aha moment of today? Is there something you want to stop doing? Or is there something you want to start doing because of what you learned in this session today? And lastly, do you belong to an organization that could use something like this? And the reason why I come and speak to incredible LGBTQ people all over the world is because I have found when individuals are empowered, they can create incredible change within systems, within organizations, within societies. I have found when I go into companies and I do diversity and inclusion trainings, and I'm able to develop allies within the company, those empowered allies, it doesn't stop at the cubicle when they go home at night. Their allyship goes with them. And all of a sudden that night, they're sitting down at the dinner table with their kids and they're saying, I learned about non-binary today. Do you have any non-binary friends? The answer is always yes. And that parent and that child is having a conversation they might not have ever had otherwise. I love increasing diversity and inclusion in companies, but what I really love is hearing about how it's impacting families. That when those parents become allies at work, they're then allies to their kids at home. It's a big deal. So thank you so much. Let's see if I can stop sharing. Get back to the screen. Excellent. Let's move to the Q&A session. Love it. Thank you all so much. I hope you enjoyed it.